More than a dozen armored vehicles, supply trucks, and multiple Russian infantry groups were reported knocked out of action in a short burst of fighting near Pokrovsk, according to Ukrainian sources, as FPV drones and reconnaissance UAVs dominated the airspace. Exact loss figures are still being reviewed, but one fact is already clear. A mechanized push that included tanks, infantry carriers, and added anti-drone protection failed to move past its opening phase. The advance stalled not because of a single lucky strike, but because almost every movement was detected, tracked, and punished from above. What makes this episode stand out is not the damage alone, but the pace. Vehicles were hit before reaching contact. Infantry were targeted while moving, regrouping, or carrying ammunition. Supply routes became exposure zones instead of lifelines. In this environment, even slowing down became a risk, and stopping often meant destruction. This pattern points to a deeper shift on the battlefield. Ukraine did not rely on isolated drone hits or dramatic moments. Instead, aerial surveillance and FPV strikes worked together to control timing, direction, and distance, turning the low sky into a constant filter that decided who could advance and who could not. What unfolded near Pokers suggests more than a failed assault. It signals how traditional attacks are losing effectiveness when every road, tree line, and ruined building is watched from above, and when precision strikes arrive faster than units can adapt. The sequence opens with Russian infantry moving in small groups near the Pokrovsk-Novopavlovka sector, where uneven spacing and broken formation quickly create gaps between soldiers as they attempt to cross open ground and damaged terrain. One soldier drifts farther than intended, stepping away from cover while trying to adjust direction. And that single movement is enough to draw attention from a Ukrainian reconnaissance UAV already circling above the area. The drone does not rush the strike because its first task is to keep the target in sight, holding altitude and angle while the soldier continues forward without realizing he has been marked. Within moments, an FPV drone is launched toward the fixed position, flying low and fast as the isolated infantryman looks for shelter among trees and debris that no longer block observation from above. The distance closes quickly, and the encounter ends before any regrouping is possible, leaving no time for warning or coordination with nearby troops who are already moving in different directions. Around the same area, other Russian soldiers attempt short relocations, stepping out from ruined buildings or moving between tree lines. And each movement is followed closely by drones that maintain visual contact from the air. Some try to slow down and wait, while others rush forward in the hope of reaching cover. But neither choice changes the outcome once the UAV holds the position and guides the next strike. As one target is hit, nearby motion becomes visible as well, since soldiers instinctively react by running or changing direction, which exposes additional positions to aerial tracking. FPV drones arrive one after another, adjusting course as targets move, and the ground situation shifts rapidly as small infantry elements are removed before they can link up or form a defensive line. The fighting at this stage stays close to the ground, focused on individuals in small groups rather than large formations, and each engagement unfolds within seconds once contact is made. This activity takes place along approaches that lead toward Pokrovsk, an area treated as sensitive because pressure here threatens supply routes and opens further access toward the Dnipropetrovsk region. That context explains why drone crews remain active even against single soldiers, because clearing the edges prevents infantry from stabilizing positions ahead of larger movements. As the sequence continues, attempts to pause inside temporary shelters also fail, since entry points and exits are watched, and any movement inside damaged structures is picked up when a soldier steps out to relocate. Several engagements follow the same rhythm with detection first, tracking next, and a strike that arrives before nearby troops can respond or even confirm what is happening. The ground picture becomes fragmented as Russian infantry no longer move as a connected unit, but as scattered figures reacting under pressure, each trying to avoid the next drone overhead. No clear front line is visible at this stage, only a series of short, sharp encounters that remove manpower piece by piece while the surrounding area remains under observation. By the end of this phase, the result is not measured by territory gained or lost, but by the absence of organized movement as infantry presence thins out and coordination breaks down before heavier forces come into play. What begins with one soldier losing contact turns into a wider clearing action where movement itself becomes the trigger for engagement, and the opening rhythm of the battle is set by drones rather than by troops on the ground. The second phase begins as Russian forces shift from scattered infantry movement to a concentrated mechanized advance near Pokrovsk, with tanks and armored vehicles moving together along defined routes toward Ukrainian positions. The column forms with infantry carriers following close behind heavier armor, engines running continuously as crews push forward to cross open ground before contact can fully develop. According to information cited by Reuters, Ukrainian sources describe this as an unusually large mechanized effort inside the Pokrovsk area, involving around 30 vehicles rather than the smaller probing movement seen earlier. As the vehicles advance, Ukrainian reconnaissance drones are already overhead, holding position and tracking direction, while the column moves through exposed sections of road and damaged urban edges. FPV drones begin to appear shortly after, flying low and approaching from multiple angles as the mechanized group continues forward without breaking formation. At first, the first impacts occur near the front of the column, striking vehicles that are leading the movement and forcing crews to react immediately under pressure. One vehicle slows after being hit, and those behind are forced to adjust speed and spacing as dust and debris spread across the route. Several carriers shift slightly off the road in search of cover, while others brake to avoid collision, and the original alignment of the column begins to loosen. FPV drones continue to arrive in quick succession, targeting vehicles that are no longer moving at the same pace as the rest of the group. As the advance stretches out, individual vehicles become separated by short gaps, and each gap draws more attention from drones circling above. Infantry inside the carriers are now faced with limited choices, remaining mounted in vehicles that are under threat or preparing to dismount into areas already watched from the air. Additional FPV drones strike from the sides and rear, hitting vehicles that have drifted away from the main body or slowed to navigate obstacles. Tanks that were expected to push through are forced to reduce speed as well, since moving ahead alone leaves them exposed while support vehicles struggle behind. The route becomes crowded with damaged equipment, smoke, and debris, which narrows movement options and limits the ability to maneuver or turn around. Drivers focus on steering through blocked sections, while crews scan for threats that cannot be seen directly from inside armored holes. FPV drones exploit these moments, adjusting flight paths to follow vehicles that attempt to change direction or pull into partial cover. Several carriers come to a halt after taking damage, and nearby vehicles slow down further as crews try to avoid disabled equipment. The mechanized group no longer advances as a single unit, but as separate elements reacting to immediate danger from above. Communication becomes difficult as movement fragments with vehicles spread unevenly along the approach and no clear path forward. Ukrainian drones maintain pressure throughout this phase, striking targets that hesitate or stop, then shifting quickly to the next visible vehicle, Each new hit adds to congestion along the route, turning the planned advance into a confined space filled with obstacles and limited exits. Infantry dismount in some areas, seeking shelter near vehicles or nearby structures, while drones continue to circle and watch these movements closely. The push loses forward drive as more vehicles are damaged or blocked by those already disabled ahead. Attempts to regroup are constrained by constant drone presence, which tracks any renewed movement along the same routes. The advance ends with vehicles scattered along the approach, some damaged, others stationary, and crews focused on survival rather than progress. The third phase centers on how Ukrainian forces run their drone kill chain during the fighting near Pikros. As reconnaissance UAVs and FPV drones operate in a clear sequence rather than acting alone, the action begins with reconnaissance drones holding steady above the area, watching damaged vehicles, halted columns, and nearby infantry positions without rushing into immediate strikes. These UAVs stay high enough to avoid ground fire while maintaining visual contact and adjusting position to keep targets inside the camera frame as movement continues below. Once a vehicle or group of soldiers is confirmed, coordinates are fixed and passed on, and the reconnaissance drone remains in place to track changes on the ground. FPV drones are then launched in turns, not as a single wave, but one after another, each one guided toward a specific target already marked from above. As the first FPV closes in, the reconnaissance drone continues to watch, allowing adjustments if the vehicle shifts direction or if infantry move away from the original position. When the first strike lands, the process does not stop because the UAV overhead immediately checks the result and looks for remaining movement around the impact site. If a vehicle is damaged but still mobile, another FPV is sent in, approaching from a different angle while the reconnaissance drone maintains line of sight. Infantry, who dismount after a hit, are also tracked as their movement becomes visible once they leave the vehicle or attempt to regroup nearby. This sequence repeats across multiple targets, with each strike feeding information back into the next action, creating a steady rhythm rather than isolated moments of contact. Ukrainian drone crews operate this process continuously, rotating FPV drones while keeping the same reconnaissance platform on station whenever possible, on the ground. This means Russian vehicles and infantry are rarely surprised by a single drone, but are instead held under observation while follow-up strikes are prepared. As FPV drones arrive in sequence, crews on the ground face repeated pressure with little time to change position between impacts. Vehicles that attempt to move after an initial hit are tracked again, and infantry who run from one piece of cover to another remain visible during each relocation. The reconnaissance drone plays a key role throughout, as it keeps the area mapped and prevents targets from disappearing between strikes. Smoke, dust, and debris from earlier impacts do not stop the process because the UAV above can adjust altitude and angle to maintain visibility. As more FPV drones are used, the space around the halted advance becomes increasingly controlled, with movement below reacting to threats that arrive in a predictable but relentless order. This system removes guesswork from the fight, since detection comes first, confirmation follows, and strikes are launched only after targets are locked in place. The result on the ground is a loss of initiative as vehicles and infantry are forced to react to drones rather than pushing forward or reorganizing. Even when numbers remain on paper, the ability to act freely disappears once the kill chain stays active over the same area. By the time this phase is fully underway, the battle no longer depends on sudden clashes, but on which side controls the sequence of observation and strikes near Pikrovsk. That control allows Ukrainian forces to decide when and where each engagement happens, while the mechanized group below remains under constant watch. With armored vehicles damaged or stopped, soldiers dismount and move in small numbers, heading toward nearby houses, temporary shelters, tree lines, and shallow field positions in an effort to stay out of sight. Some slip into ruined buildings through broken doors or collapsed walls, while others drop into hastily dug pits or press themselves against forest edges where branches still offer partial concealment. Ukrainian drones remain active over these areas, circling slowly and watching for movement as infantry attempt to relocate from one hiding place to another. When a soldier emerges from a doorway or adjusts their stance within a ruined building, the motion is detected right away, and the spot is kept under surveillance. FPV drones are dispatched to these locations, skimming low over debris-strewn roads or along the borders of wooded areas where troops are attempting to advance stealthily. Within the wreckage, structural damage restricts secure escape routes, with blocked stairs or fallen ceilings channeling infantry through expected pathways that are already monitored from the air. What used to serve as refuge now hinders them, as breached walls and exposed roofs enable drones to peer straight into areas that offer incomplete shielding. At the woodland fringes, comparable scenarios unfold as troops push further into hiding, only to dash toward another cluster of trees upon detecting threats above. Every shift opens a fleeting opportunity for exposure, and drones maintain that exposure sufficiently for FPV assaults to ensue. Certain soldiers opt to stay motionless, banking on drones overlooking them, while others dash forward and embrace the hazard. Yet both options pose risks amid unrelenting monitoring. FPV drones descend from high altitudes or at low trajectories, infiltrating yards, weaving through crevices amid edifices, and converging before troops can reposition. With each impact, adjacent infantry respond by fleeing or altering course, exposing more spots and attracting extra scrutiny from nearby drones. The terrain fragments, lacking defined fronts or secure havens for units to regroup and regain cohesion. Notable in this stage is the swift escalation of tension once infantry forfeit vehicular cover, as all decisions occur under perpetual oversight. Some squads achieve brief retreats, though even these are pursued until they exit drone range or vanish into denser landscapes. Others must forsake intended paths upon FPV drone arrival, diverting them into unknown territory with scant protection and restricted getaway options. As combat persists, active troop numbers in the zone diminish, not via one major confrontation, but through ongoing skirmishes that eliminate personnel incrementally. At this juncture, the conflict pivots from securing territory to enduring sufficiently to flee the monitored region. The strain arises not from an abrupt onslaught, but from persistent tracking that shadows infantry across all forms of refuge they seek. The result is a combat zone where hiding is tenuous, relocation is expensive, and momentary visibility can trigger instant repercussions beneath the hovering skies near Pokrovsk. The fifth stage illustrates how drone dominance transitions from targeting vehicles to dismantling Russian forces' capacity to regroup, with FPV strikes trailing troops along resupply lines and withdrawal corridors close to poachers. Following the armored advance's breakdown, compact infantry teams strive to re-establish stability by transporting munitions ahead, escorting injured allies rearward, or traversing exposed terrain to connect with allied groups. Such actions occur via confined trails, battered avenues, and vulnerable spans between structures, where Ukrainian scouting drones maintain vigilance over these arteries. the moment activity emerges. As soldiers haul crates of ammo manually or proceed in duos to a defensive fallback, the action is identified swiftly, prompting FPV drone launches to those sites before the team finishes the task. Multiple confrontations develop thus, with FPV hits targeting personnel not pushing forward or assaulting, but merely sustaining their formations or preserving lives. Consequently, reorganization efforts falter, as the elimination of vital couriers or transporters disrupts munitions delivery and compels others to halt and conceal themselves. The intensity persists as evacuating troops attempt to span brief uncovered stretches between hides, with drones tailing tightly and narrowing the gap before the group attains the subsequent shelter. Uncrewed land vehicles ferrying supplies are shadowed on foreseeable routes, and upon spotting, FPV drones plunge to strike the payload, frequently igniting follow-on blasts that render the path impassable. Artillery concealed in bunkers or masked with netting is located similarly, as scouting drones probe for altered soil entrances or thermal signatures betraying the site. FPV drones then penetrate these havens directly, neutralizing cannons that, though silent, remain essential for backup and protection. Each such strike erodes the potential for suppressive fire or aid to proximate infantry, stranding survivors without anticipated reinforcement. Lightly armored transports are pivotal here, as lorries and repurposed civilian rides endeavor to deliver fuel, provisions, and munitions to the forefront. These conveyances navigate roadways already under drone scrutiny, with several intercepted en route prior to arriving at drop-off zones or safe spots. Certain operators halt beneath foliage or beside wrecked edifices, yet the transit itself invites notice, and FPV drones converge before goods can be scattered. Upon striking these vulnerable assets, the harm isn't invariably spectacular, but its ripple effects expand. Fuel fails to reach destinations, ammo depletes, and reinforcements lag. The depletion of these secondary objectives doesn't manifest as a lone field detonation, but gradually vacates outposts and urges leftover troops to ration assets. As logistics arteries collapse, unity erodes even more, isolating minor detachments sans explicit directives or resources to persist in battle. By now, the arena is characterized by voids rather than occupations, with reduced activity and fewer bids to reclaim the space. Ukrainian drones sustain patrols over identical sectors, neutralizing any fresh push to advance personnel or gear. This dominance is bolstered by continuous drone accessibility, backed by initiatives to procure millions of FPV systems, enabling steady rather than fleeting oppression. If Propsk represents a pivotal point in this offensive, the clashes around it convey a stark and sobering lesson. The events here demonstrate how rapidly a conventional thrust can become irrelevant once aerial dominance is seized and all actions are observed. Mechanized formations projected power initially, but that facade dissolved as drones governed pace, trajectory, and schedule. Gradually, the engagement veered from head-on battles to mobility oversight, where UAVs and FPV drones determined advances and halts. This wasn't defined by a singular devastating blow, but by an incremental erosion that stripped alternatives until the offensive imploded. It signals a drive to normalize the drone elimination sequence as routine operations, not exceptional maneuvers. The lingering query is Russia's counter to this strain. Jamming signals, inclement conditions, and spreading out might mitigate harm, but their ability to shatter the pattern remains uncertain. Concurrently, Ukraine confronts its challenge. Can manufacturing, preparation, and synchronization endure to render instances like Pokrovsk a consistent benchmark rather than an isolated triumph? Drop your insights in the comments. Hit like on the video and subscribe to World War History for additional straightforward coverage of actual conflicts, contemporary armaments, and the geopolitics driving them.